Hi, my name is Joe Jackson. I'm a journalist, author, interviewer and broadcaster. And what you're about to hear is one of the roughly 1,400 interviews I did for publications such as the Irish Times, Sunday Independent, Hot Press Magazine and for RT Radio 1. How do I know there are roughly 1,400 interviews? Because I recently digitized all the damn tapes myself. But remember that many of the interviews were done for the print media and recorded on cassette tapes. So some are, let's say, sonically challenged. However, I happen to believe that sonic considerations should at times give way to historical significance. And I'm glad to say that at least some powers that be in RT Radio 1 agreed with me on this, and broadcast between 2015 and 2018 many of my interviews in a series called The Joe Jackson Tapes Revisited. What follows is a programme from that series. By the way, if you want to access the full tapes for personal or professional use, for example in a documentary, you can contact me via my website, joejacksoninterviewer.com. Enjoy the podcast.
This Charlie McCreevy interview took place way back in 1989. Nearly a decade later, McCreevy approached me at the opening of an art exhibition, and by the way, we'd never spoken before the interview or since. And he told me something that makes these particular Joe Jackson tapes a must for this series, I believe. McCreevy claimed that what he remembered most about our interview was that Fianna Fail had been going through a painful period of transition and redefinition, particularly following the relatively recent coalition with the Progressive Democrats, and that our interview had captured this tension. Then tellingly, earlier this year, 2017, when I spoke on the phone with McCreevy for the first time since then, he verified for me that this remained his abiding memory of the interview. Then Charlie added, maybe only half jokingly, "But I can't remember all that controversial things I said to you back then." I'm here to jog the man's memory. But first, a few facts. Charles Charlie McCreevy was born in Sallins, County Kildare in 1949, educated at Naas CBS, Gormanston College and at UCD where he studied commerce. He then became a chartered accountant and was elected a Fianna Fail TD in 1977. That general election was a landslide victory for Charles Haughey and his supporters, which included McCreevy. But 5 years later, he tabled a motion of no confidence in Haughey. This led to a leadership challenge by Desmond O'Malley, an open ballot that failed. Only 21 of 79 party members supported McCreevy's motion. They then became known as the Gang of 22. And McCreevy himself became, as he says in this interview, the devil incarnated to some fanatical supporters of Haughey in Fianna Fail. It said his name was even on a death list.
That was very strange times in Fianna Fail, and
fearful times.
Well, like I can't say I was ever shaking at home at night, but I did receive phone calls, and my wife received phone calls. Oh yes, that was nice after the vote. Yeah, coming out the door. Yes. There was a whole day. That the meeting went on from 11 o'clock in the morning to nearly 11 o'clock at night, and all Fianna Fail people all over the country came up and were in buzzwells, and then get into the grounds in the Dáil, and they're all around the place, Taft Yard. You must remember Fianna Fail is a very close-knit family. They're all, and I come out anyway, and they all had to be ushered out by brought out by the ushers and the Gardaí and that. But sure, that wouldn't be sure. I was off in the football match and got far more belts than that. I was only supposed to be friendly.
All right, what about a strategy of intimidation and abuse that was imposed?
Well,
you even mentioned at the time a death list.
Well, there was look at that particular time. There was Fianna Fail people took that as I was nearest thing to Satan. And then anyone do this against her. And I tell you one thing, my mother, who was a great liberated person, taught to be independent. If she had lived to see me taking on Fianna Fail, that would the leader of Fianna Fail, she would have publicly disowned me, because whatever Fianna Fail leader said, if he told you to jump, you jumped. If you lay down, that is traditional attitude among Fianna Fail people.
Well, they said that she was. I read somewhere that she and you both believed that Dev and that came a close second to God.
I know what I said actually is that if there was a question of both between God and Devil Lair in our house, I wouldn't be too sure who'd get the second preference. That's what I said.
All right, okay.
And that's how it was. And that's for a lot of Fianna Fail people to this day. And that's why the whole thing of coalition with the PDs has come as a great culture shock. Because there are lots of people who believe like that within the Fianna Fail party, like my mother, which has been the strength of the Fianna Fail party, and I recognise it. And the problem is, what has troubled me over the years anyway, that lots of those genuine Fianna Fail people were very anti-me. That doesn't bother me too much personally, but they'll be anti-me for that kind of... I can understand why they are, because we like my mother. Like that was the deep thing, and they wouldn't understand that this bastard from Kildare, I mean, what is he doing to our party? But it's been hard to drag Fianna Fáil, what I say, into the 70s and 80s and 90s, and what I've been doing is doing what I think is the best thing for the country and the party.
But was it ever so severe that there were death lists? I mean, that was a very strong allegation.
Well, did I ever say death list?
Well, it was in the Irish Times, yeah. It said that in some hotel, you gave a speech in a hotel, check that out, that there was talk of a death list about people who had opposed and were publicly opposing Charlie Haughey.
Oh, well, there was all... Big time anyway.
I mean, if there were those kind of fanatics in the party, that should be.
But there are fanatics in every party, and I remember I got abused at meetings, and I got bad letters, and I got phone calls. My family did and everything else. But look, if you believe what you're doing is right,
persist.
You just do it, and you mightn't be proved right today or tomorrow, when you might never be proved right. But if you believe you're right, so that's the only thing that matters anyway.
I then suggested to Charlie McCreevy during this 1989 interview that the main thrust of what came to be known as the year of Gooboo 1982, and that was a tag thought up by Conor Cruise O'Brien, who described the political events that led to a second election that year as grotesque, unbelievable, bizarre and unprecedented. A little over the top. Could perhaps be rooted in Haughey's need to stifle dissent. I said to McCreevy that in European political parties, the inability to accommodate voices of dissent within the ranks was seen as a sign of political immaturity. By the way, the sounds you will hear in the background are made by someone who had arrived in McCreevy's office in Leinster House to serve us tea. And no, it wasn't Charles Haughey.
Yeah, well, that's the point I've been making over the years being Fianna Fáil, you see. And I wouldn't be like, but this was the thing with all political parties here up to quite recently, that you didn't have any dissent at all. And I'm afraid it follows through both in Fine Gael and Labour and Fianna Fáil as well. But I believe that part of the change of Irish politics will be is that people will be able to, someday I'll see the day in Leinster House when there will be an issue that it won't be an economic issue or a national issue, that there will be freedom to vote within Fianna Fáil, that you can vote any way you like. And that, I like to think that in 1989, that the views that I got pilloried and got thrown out for in the early 80s is changed. I'm still here, and it must prove something. The people have still elected me, right. And I'm still here. And I think there's greater freedom now to be able to. We must remember, Fianna Fáil went back 60 years, and in Dev's time and the Masses' time, it was a different type of people that were there. That TD came to the Dáil and he did the party line, the whole thing anyway. I think that I've been preaching for years that is changing, and I think that I'm part of that change and have helped in that change as well.
So would you say that TDs or even party leaders who can't accommodate those changes themselves, their days are numbered?
The thing is that I like to see myself in one of my roles anyway is a kind of saying things maybe a long time in advance of where the party gets to that idea. I remember financial rectitude, which was the big thing with me. Now, I was found out in 82 for saying things about financial rectitude, said the country needed economic rectitude, that the economy had to be put right, we had to take stiff measures and everything else. At least 1987, Fianna Fáil came along and did that. And at the time, it was thought to be political, that you couldn't get elected by saying those kind of things. And now if you did those kind of things, the Irish people would crucify you at the polls. Now, we weren't crucified at the polls in 89. We only got 44% of the vote, but as good as we got in 87. I remember prior to the 87 election, we promised everything to everybody, and we got 44%. See, the people of Ireland have got more politically aware, and you can't call the people anymore.
But the politicians. Is there no school of politician that just won't allow?
That is the problem. That is one of the problems. But hopefully that's going to change as well. It's hard to change. It's a slow process. It's been a slow process in all the political parties here, and it has happened. The politicians take time to change. You see, part of the difficulty in Irish political life. See, due to the electoral system that we have, the politician doesn't want to take a chance. He doesn't want to say anything outlandish like what I've done in the past, or say put the truth, because you can't say those things. It's not political to say those things. The people won't vote for you if you say those things. That's been the general kind of inverted commas concept. So the politician always waits in Irish life that the mob. He waits till the mob as well going forward. Then he tries to catch up on the mob, rather than saying I will lead the mob. And I think that I have been trying to be a leader of saying what I think is the right thing in going that way. Other politicians may wait, and there is a changing, I suppose. And most, you see, the unfortunate thing about Irish political life, I've said this in the past, so I'm not saying you knew, is that a lot of people's ambition in politics is just get into Leinster House at any cost, stay in Leinster House at any cost, and work your way up the political ladder to get into power. Now, I know that there's a great advantage in getting into political if you want to do something about it, but lots of politicians know that they want power, but don't know what they want to do with it when they get it. And it's not thing that motivates me in politics. That I'm not worrying every night of the week as to when I'm going to be minister for kind of this, that, other. I don't give two fucks about it, to be truth about it.
Mary Haughey said that she was once told by Charles Haughey that if she told the man she'd have a great future. Have you ever told that? Or did you encounter his wrath as she did? At the time of all that stuff.
I've never, Charlie Haughey never sat to me, but I have to say, and people I know wouldn't, or didn't believe this, maybe do now. Strange as it may seem, as anyway, is that him and I have enjoyed a very good personal relationship down through the years. That we can tell each other to go and jump at one another if we like, or say what we like to one another. And we get on well as because we like one. Well, I like him personally, and I think he likes me personally as well.
But at the time, when you were drunk, you went out to Conceding and all those places.
Well, but your eyes spent up
in those meetings when you face to face.
We kind of respect each other's views. See, I suppose Haughey and I are a bit alike, you see. In one sense, like there was a bit that, but sure, everyone tore strips off me. Sure, I was at meetings in Kildare when there were 200 and 300 people and all baying for my blood.
Would you have torn strips back then?
Yes, but see, that's my nature things that you defend. If you do it, you know what you're doing is right. You just do it. And I regard it as I'm a great believer in sport. It makes the man is that you play hard. If you lose, and he won all the battles at those particular occasions. But I still.
But the fact that you might have stood up and torn strips off in return, that have made somebody say in the background, that's him fucked.
One great thing about Charlie Haughey and Charlie McCreevy is this: despite our mutual best efforts, we have both survived. Like my best effort is to get rid of him, and his best effort is to get rid of me, and both of us are still bloody here, and we've come to learn to live with one another. Is that we have we get on. We always get on well personally, but kind of politically I'm able to. I am very much for since he was the original architect of the government's policy in 87 to 89, the only one that said that should be done. I was totally I think, and I said before the last election that irrespective we did badly, very well or very badly, and I didn't expect to get an overall majority, as well known, that we could hold our heads high and say that was the best government that was ever there in my time, and Haughey was leader of that government, and he has to be complimented for that. He did the right thing eventually. The only pity I can see is anyway why we had to wait so long. You see, everyone spoke about the economic problems of the country. Sure, Garris and Jukes and the devil knows what, we all spoke about them, and something should be done, but no one did speak bugger all about them until Haughey in 89. And no matter what way he's remembered, he's remembered, in my opinion, in history remembered as the man who turned this country round, and for that he is to be complimented. He is the one who did it. Everyone else spoke about it and Garris and mouthed it and we bidding it, but did fuck all about it, except Haughey. And that government will be remembered as the best that turned the country around, and I'm glad to have lived to see the day. And I was still a member of the party that he fulfilled for me the long-term views that I had when I supported him in 79, that he was the man for the country. He proved himself that he was the man for the country eventually.
Next up, I reminded McCreevy that Mary Haughey had recently claimed in an interview that when it came to economic issues and social legislation, he was a prime candidate for the Progressive Democrats Party, and that the major difference between him and the party stemmed from his position in relation to Northern Ireland. But that, I suggested to McCreevy, was never really an option for him, was it? And listen out for his needless dig at Dunleary. I laughed. Maybe I should have given him a dig. It's my hometown.
It was never an option for me, to be honest, but because I admire people very much that can lift themselves out with their back, and see, to me, like leaving Fianna Fail.
So can lift themselves out and what?
They're what they're brought up to believe in the one thing. Right. See, for me to leave Fianna Fail, to be honest, but anyway, at any time, would have been impossible. I come finally to the crunch. I just remember what my mother would have said. Like, she would have turned in her grave. You can do anything like I nearly proved that I have done nearly what I liked in Fianna Fail and survived the bloody thing. But you stuck in. You didn't move
because of your mother.
Tradition and the north. The north would be a very. See, whatever differences Charlie Haughey and I have had, we've never had a tincture of difference, even in back about the Northern Ireland thing, because we, like, maybe I'm an old style green old nationalist deep in the background, and you see there are lots despite what the people of Dublin 4 and Dún might think about Fianna Fáil as being a crowd of rednecks and one thing or another, there's a great old kind of, I prefer to be meeting a fella from Clacharinka in County Kildare, a genuine Fianna Fáil man, than I'd love to be sitting in a house in Dublin 4 drinking tea and coffee. Like, there's something great about them. They stick together. When they're for you, they're for you. And there's that old spirit of camaraderie. There's that old thread of, say, nationalism, come republicanism, going through us all. And we stick it out together. Now, I've done terrible things on them and upset them greatly, because some of my greatest supporters after 77, I upset them all about what I did and said and what I tried to do in the party. But there's something great about them. Even the people who oppose me bitterly, I prefer to be in their company and with them. And then the whole thing about the Northern thing is that we are actually, no matter what people might think of it, if it hadn't been a Fianna Fáil for the last 60 years, there'd be no constitutional national party. We were the kind of bulwark against kind of provoism and that type of thing. Now, there's certain elements of Fianna Fáil or a bit like that, but if you hadn't got a Fianna Fáil, say 60 years ago, where would the genuine national expression have gone? It ended up in Fianna Fáil, most of it. Where would you have it? So they're like, we have been that barrier against kind of...
I do want to address that in more depth towards the end, because I think that's a central issue. Okay, so you're saying then that the PDs are the Dublin 4 party?
No, I'm not. No, you must remember now that we're all sleeping in the same bed together. So I have to be a little bit careful now, Joe. But no, you see, I preached over the years. I got terrible trouble saying this. I said many years ago there was no difference between Fianna Fáil.
Do you now have to be very careful?
Not at all. Not at all. Why would I be? Sure, I wouldn't say what I was going to say anyway. So it doesn't even what you ask me. Like that was a kind of a joke. So you can put it out. Laughing. No, you put in a. But you see, I said many years ago and got in big trouble that there was no basic difference between Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael. And that Irish politics would eventually break down the left-right divide. Now, everyone is saying it now, but I remember them saying all those things. As far as I remember, the only journalists that agreed with me and wrote about it were one Dick Walsh and actually John Bowman, who spoke a lot about it, or kind of agreed with me. Now everyone, of course, is talking about it. Even the left didn't talk about it then.
Do you think it will happen, though?
But you see, so therefore I always said, where then is there a place in Irish politics for parties such as the PDs? Like if you're like playing football and all the 30 players on the pitch, 26 are in the right half of the field, it's very hard to get a kick at the fucking ball. Like, whereas it's easy to get the ball over the halfway line, the other 4 lads will be able to score. And it's the natural thing, like, what constituency is there for long term to have 3 middle centrist right-wing parties? So in the long term, it'd be very difficult to see, say, a new party such as the PDs growing.
Right.
Now, they did very well in 87, and I actually said that the vote, but I didn't think that would be the toughest election. Now, probably will end up in 20 years' time, there'll be one centre-right party, and maybe we'll call it, we'll call it Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael, PD, whatever funny name we'll give to it. But in the long term, that has to happen.
Back in 1989, in the most recent election, Fianna Fáil's share of the vote in Kildare had gone down, whereas Labour and the Workers' Party votes had risen. Couldn't this move to the left, I suggested to McCreevy, be a signifier of a trend nationwide? Likewise, mightn't the move away from Fianna Fáil reflect the fact that it now was seen more as a party of the advantaged rather than disadvantaged? Mightn't it be in danger, therefore, of losing what had been the core of its support? Outside Dún, of course. Rural and working class people.
The strange thing about that now, about having preached about the left growing in Irish politics, it hasn't grown as fast in Kildare as I would have expected. Like the Labour, as I thought it would have grown more in this election than it did.
There's a barometer of a shift to the left, and this public perception that Fianna Fáil is now becoming more of a party for the advantaged.
I would hate. I know that's the image that the left are trying to tag on us, Joe. No, they're a party of the right. See, Fianna Fáil's great strength, as Brian Lennon put it many years ago, it was neither.
But you said that earlier too. You said there's very little difference between economic issues anyway.
Between Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael.
Yeah, and especially Fianna Fáil have now absorbed Fine Gael kind of.
Yes, you see, exactly. And the problem has been anyway. We had by necessity. Like I'm all for, as you might well know, the last government's economic policy, which was really antipathy to the normal Fianna Fáil voter. The Fianna Fáil voter wasn't nurtured in that, and the Fianna Fáil supporter. We were never the party for the hair shirt and everything else. But that's where Haughey, I think, has been a great leader. He would know that wouldn't be the Fianna Fáil natural kind of constituency, and yet he was prepared to do it because it was the right thing to do. Like, I think Charlie Haughey...
At the risk of losing core support?
Yes. maybe I would like to often regard myself as a very malign person in Irish politics, but I think Haughey is the most malign person in Irish politics, both from a personal point of view and also from a political point of view. See, no one has given him credit for that, because he would know in his heart and soul. I'll give you a small example. After the 87 election, the Fianna Fail TDs, 99% of the Fianna Fail TDs couldn't believe that we were doing what we were doing. And that includes the cabinet. And none of them believe, until months and months later, how could we be holding up the opinion polls doing this kind of thing? Sure, because the Fianna Fail voter, the common member, they were totally aghast at this kind of thing anyway, because they were never nurtured in this type of thing. Right. And the Fianna Fail vote has changed. Like, the problem has been now with Fianna Fail is that we got 44% this election. It's a totally different 44% than we got in the 87 election.
Which is the question that it's becoming more middle class and less working class and rural. So that's the question.
Yes.
Losing its core, which has historically been at the centre of the Fianna Fail party.
Yes, but that can be recovered.
Do you agree it is?
Yes, but the figures of this election would prove that. In my opinion, there is no doubt about it. Because
Did that bother you? You described yourself earlier as kind of Fianna Fail to the core.
Yes, it would in this sense, but I put it down to this, that we had to do what we had to do, and at least Haughey was prepared to do it. It does bother me, because in one sense, go back to Brian Lennon again, he's always said the great strength of Fianna Fail was that we weren't caught up. The great strength of Irish politics was not Fianna Fail. There was no class kind of politics. I kind of argued over the years that it was better to have this clear kind of class divide. I'm not so sure about it now. I think maybe Lennon's idea is...
You think it's moving
better.
that direction now?
It's moving that direction, yes.
Class divisions.
Yeah, I'm afraid so. And Fianna Fail has always been the kind of catch-all party of these. And we were really the Labour Party. We were really the Labour Party. In a normal European country, we were the Labour Party, because the Labour Party votes always about 10 or 11%, and we have really got what would be in other constituencies, other countries, their vote. Right. And that's evidenced by the fact that trade unions must vote Fianna Fail, and we wouldn't have the votes that we got.
But do you see then that as a danger sign hanging over the party?
Yes, I do. I'll have to admit that I do, because I'm not too sure whether... I'm excluding now Charlie Haughey from this, because I believe that he knows what he's at. But the Fianna Fail kind of representative may not be as in tune with the different type of electorate that he is now representing than what he did in the past. And that would be a little bit of a problem.
Sure, a bit like that. You said you wouldn't like to sit and have tea and coffee with the people in Dublin 4.
No, I didn't say no, Joe. I have had many cups of tea and coffee and glass of white wine in Dublin 4.
I couldn't resist.
I know. I don't blame you. I don't blame you. I deserve it. But is that I would like to see Fianna Fail losing what is the basic roots of Ireland. Like I spoke about them there earlier, and they are really the real side of the country.
Well, someone suggested that Fianna Fail's image as the party of the plain people of Ireland first began to be eroded when Lynch's government set up TACA, established to raise funds from the business community. The question arising from that is, to this day, the party refuses to make public these donations, despite growing public fears that it is to these sources Fianna Fail now owes its allegiances. Would you want such secret funding made public?
I would prefer if I would be in support of an act that would make the political funding of all political parties above the line, that you had to, like United States system, that you had to, that if all parties, if there's a bill brought in and all parties agree, but it would be, I would certainly not be agreeable to is that we'd be the only party that go along with it. But as a principle, yes, I'm in favour of it.
So do you think the electorate have legitimate fears in thinking that the governments all parties can show favouritism to those who fund?
I don't believe it's necessarily true, but once you have that type, once you don't have disclosure, you will see. Irish like thrives in that kind of thing. See, we're such a small little community. Right. Like, sure, Ireland's only a parish. Everyone knows everyone in this country. Sure, if you piss crooked at the corner to the fella down the road here before the end of the day, no matter who you'd be. And that's the Irish way. You always look something bad into what the politicians are doing or what anyone is doing, so therefore I'd like to see it. Yes,
so would you have been approached by people along the way to say, if you do this for me, I'll help the party?
And not for me,
if it's not local, then it's the parish.
Well, it's I have to say, for a TD, sure, what could a TD do for you that you couldn't get yourself? Now, what could I do for you? Suppose you asked me to do so, what could I do for you? I'm not a member of the county council. I can only make representations for you, maybe to speed up things, say your social welfare doesn't come to every case of me. So therefore, I personally now have never experienced it.
Okay, well, what about this thing that was on the news today, Rory Quinn saying that there should be a sworn public inquiry if there is corruption in the planning board?
Well, certainly there's corruption within the planning board. I've no hesitation is that the Gardaí should act in the first place, and we'll wait until we see the Garda investigation completed. And
what about the
we
allegation that there are 5 politicians involved and some received sums of up to £50,000 as a kickback for helping in whatever way they could?
That would be an absolutely scandalous situation, but we'll wait. I don't understand anything that would preempt the inquiry of the Gardaí. Certainly no one could condone anything like that.
But it feeds into, like I was listening to it on the news, it feeds into the public perception of, there they go, those politicians again.
That's
lying in their back pocket.
That's the real sad thing about it, because you see, I said many years ago that the Irish people were becoming so cynical about the political system, and the strange thing was on the radio the night Austin Curry was elected. I was doing the counter RT, and he said the one thing that alarmed him more than anything else down here was the cynicism that the public had about the political system and politicians. He said, at least in the north, he said, we know who the enemy is. It's the gunman of all sides, and that's the enemy of democracy. I said many years ago that the enemy of democracy down here was just what he spoke about there, this cynicism about politicians. And part of the reason was we kept doing this tweedledum, tweedledee shit election, throwing money at them and promising things, doing ridiculous things. And Curry said, as a new person, I'm glad that someone came in new and could see it, something I preached on for years. And this is another thing that would lend itself to that type of thing, and that's the sad thing about it. And by the way, when I say now, as against your own profession, right. like have an awful lot to be responsible for in kind of cultivating that image about the politicians as well. Not about this thing about the planning thing or anything yet, but the whole thing. The politicians are only in it for what can get out when everyone is knackery. Right. Like the worst, as I said one time, the worst normally to be a politician in the country is to be a calling. Do something good. In Ireland, you're nearly the dregs of humanity to say you're a politician. You need to be ashamed to say it sometimes, that you be a politician, because, that kind of dirt, like anyone time it's dirty game, It's...
Right, I don't mean to set journalists against politicians, but Charles Haughey all but telling Vincent Brown to fuck off when he tries to raise the questions about the Goodman issue, again would heighten public fears.
Well, I've great difficulty in defending the things I do myself without trying to defend what Charlie Haughey said to Vincent Brown. But
you can see how it's feeding into what you say is the public perception of politicians.
Yes, but the media.
The media just reported that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, when in the pre-election one discussion, the subject was attempted to be broached, he was all but told to fuck off. Forget it.
Well, if that occurred, it occurred. I like if I'm sure Mr. Haughey and Mr. Brown have their own ways of conducting things, but let me say this, kind of like I wonder if it's Vincent Brown or any of the stars of the radio, do they be so much open to kind of public criticism as politicians have to be the whole time? Like they're not. Like the one people who can take criticism less than any other sector of Irish side are media people. They cannot take it at all. They can't even broach a bit of it.
Okay, but there are serious questions opened up about the Goodman controversy, the sugar company. Do they raise questions in your mind as to the political system and raise doubts in you as a member of the public as well as being a politician?
Well, I'd have to say about the whole thing about the whole kind of Goodman episode. Larry Goodman has become the kind of Beth Nor now of Irish politics anyway, because he's been very successful. See, there's a great thing about Irish life is this anyway. You can hardly win. Like in America, if you start a company and it fails the first time, Joe comes along and says, hard luck about that now, Mick, try again. You try again and you fail the second, and the fellow said, try again. And you succeed the third time, he says, good man, Joe, Jesus Christ, you're a great man, now you're a millionaire, one thing another. In Ireland, if you fail the first time, they'll say, happy Jesus, sure, I knew him, sure, he couldn't, sure, he was useless anyway. If you could see, they'll say, oh, sure, I knew him, he didn't have the arse in his trousers, and he couldn't have got it right. See, that's the great thing. The notion of begrudgery in Irish society is wonderful. It stems through politics. And Larry Goodman has a very successful person in Ireland, has made millions of pounds for the country and, of course, for himself. And, of course, he's been so successful with it, and now he attacks that. I'm an admirer of Larry Goodman. Actually, Larry Goodman is one of the few people I have actually never met.
Right. What about those who suggest, though, he made his fortune because of the government? I mean, you're not suggesting there's no corruption, surely. I'm suggesting is that until it's proved to me that anything to do with Larry Goodman has been corrupt, until it's proved to me, I say Larry Goodman has been very successful and fair play to him, and I hope wish him thousands of pounds, thousands of more. Larry Goodman was a great success. Long before the last Fianna Fail government or the previous coalition government, that Larry Goodman has been the great success stories of Irish life.
He's a man that started off with a cart in Dundalk, and I admire him. Like, I'm one of those people, he started off small, he's got very big, and more power to him for making the wealth that he's done, and he's created lots of employment here, and I wish him the best of luck.
And he loves the Fianna Fail party too.
Larry Goodman, I'm sure, I don't know Larry that well, but I'm sure that Larry is out to do as best he can for his company and himself, and whether Fine Gael were in power or anything else, he'd love them as well.
Right, so would you have encountered corruption in your own time?
Look, I've seen corruption in GA clubs and rugby clubs and everything else, miniature corruption, sure, but experienced as a politician, I've never been in a position that anyone tried to corrupt me. Maybe because it's like the Fianna Fail organisation in Kildare, they don't even bother now to hassle me anymore about my views about anything. Like back 10 years ago, Jesus, I've been in trouble the whole bloody time with it anyway, because they've come to accept that I'm going to do my own thing. So maybe on account of being, I'm so an independent person, people don't bother me with that type of thing.
Well, also, if you're known as being honest and direct and outspoken, you would not be the person to approach
exactly.
Of involving you in corruption.
That's probably it. So I'm not the person to be trying to do that to anyway. You know what I mean? So maybe that's the reason. So they were, you want to ask someone else about, because I might be the worst example you could.
Right, sure,
Here I had to ask McCreevy if he felt he was being penalised at a local and national level. He was, at this point, a backbencher by Fianna Fáil for having been what they might call a bad boy opposing Haughey in 1982. First, he focused on what had been his position on Kildare County Council. Because
the reason I had the council 85 was Fianna Fáil didn't select me to run 85. They denied me the nomination.
Oh, yeah.
That was part of their politics as well. They wanted to have their pound of flesh, and they got it. In fact, it was a bit of luck not to be selected in 85.
Right.
Because I think I would have had great trouble being elected in the 85 local elections.
So you lost your nomination because you've been a bad boy?
No, I think the reason I lost yes, because all the row going on between 79 to 85, and the area I represented, the Fianna Fáil organisation, was really the hardcore of enemy support against me, and they wanted to have their pound of flesh, so they didn't deny me the nomination. It turned out to be a lucky thing, I think. I don't know.
Seamus Brennan, another graduate from the Club of 22, has been taken so far back into the fold that he now has a ministerial position, which you haven't.
Seamus Brennan has become a minister of Fianna Fáil. I'll have to say one thing as well about Fianna Fáil. Since the formation of the PDs in 85, that cut out a lot of the internal trouble in Fianna Fáil, because it was matter then a put up or shut up, and we all kind of, like the Fianna Fáil party meetings after that, developed into a real kind of forum that you could say, that you could go up and give your genuine views. No one kind of labelled you one way or the other, and it did bring a great amount of unity after the formation of the PDs. Now Seamus is in the cabinet now, so like he's there.
Did you expect a position this time round?
Not at all. No? God's sake, not at all. No, not at all. I know whether I'd be honest with it anyway, is that 10, 11 years ago I would have been not a major ambition of mine, but I would like to have been anyway. But it's no longer. I like the role that I have in Fianna Fáil. I've more or less the freedom without being authorised to do things. I have, down to the years, I have a certain amount of respect for the views I have. It's not an ambition of mine to, like, I'd like to be, if I'm going to be ever selected as a Fianna Fáil minister, I'd like to be selected on ability. Right. Rather than where I come from or for my colourful views or anything else, I just like to be selected on ability. And I think that's
a friend of the party leader,
or a friend of anyone. That's the reason. If I was to be minister, I'd like to be, because someone thought I was best man for that job at that time.
But you claimed earlier that you are still on friendly terms with Council.
Oh, very, very friendly terms with it. Yes, just that's the problem.
So can we expect the Maverick Fianna Fáil TD to be rewarded for being a friend?
I don't. That to be the best rewarding, making anyone the cabinet minister.
You don't think it should be?
It should be.
But it has been.
It may have been. Like everyone that picks, if everyone was to pick, as I said, the Irish rugby team, they'd all pick 15 different players. It's the job of the leader of the party there to pick his team, and it's his right. Some people do it. If I was leader of Fianna Fáil, I'd select the cabinet on a far different basis than you, if you were the leader of Fianna Fáil.
Or than Charles Haughey.
Well, sure, everyone is selected differently, and he's leader. He picks his team. It's not. I can genuinely say I tell you one thing now. Do
you not feel that I really stand back and say I shouldn't have done that?
No, well, I think I tell you the only thing that's ever vexed me about criticism, about things. Lots of things are written about me down to the years. I must have sold more newspapers for Tony O'Reilly than any man in Ireland. And
so he loves you too.
I hope he lives in County Kildare, and I think I genuinely deserve a few kind of shares for all the papers I sold from over the years. but I don't have any Irish independence here. But having said that, and I've had good press, and I've had bad press, and I've had belittling press, and everything else, both locally and nationally. And sometimes, and I never, no, there's no journalist in this country can ever say that I rang him up to criticise what he said about me. Right? I take it on the chin whether it's good or bad. But one thing that if I could say there's only one thing in my political life that was ever written or implied about me that vexed me, that was in 81 and 82 and 81 that I was doing all those things because I had been passed over for promotion. That is the one thing that has ever vexed me. And it was Fianna Fail naturally did it, and the press followed up, and locally and nationally. And the local people said, no, the Fianna Fail should done the reason McCreevy is like that. That is the furthest thing from the truth anyway. That's the only thing that's ever written about me. Jesus Christ, when there's a bad thing written about you, you don't like it and you get real mad. But the thing that vexed, because that is not true. That's the only one thing that's vexed me more than anything else. Sure, what you're going to write about me is probably going to vex me as well, but I won't bring you up to say it. I'd say, sure, that's his opinion he formed on the basis of what he said to me.
I'll just present what you said.
But that is because that is not an issue with me. So you ask me to be passed over, that doesn't bother me at all. I may be just one person, maybe the only person in the Fianna Fail party that thinks like that. And most issues I have been for a long time the only person that thought that way. It is not an issue to me. It neither was in the past nor is now. It doesn't bother me at all.
Here I had to suggest that maybe the only way Charlie McCreevy might be offered a ministerial position, or indeed if the following was feasible even as a concept, become party leader, was if Haughey lost power. Incidentally, McCreevy never became party leader, but on February the 11th, 1992, he did receive his first ministerial position, Minister for Social Welfare, when Haughey was replaced as Taoiseach by Albert Reynolds. I should have made a bet.
I said one time about myself, I thought it was radio or television or an interview, I said I didn't really think I was suited to be a member of any bloody party. Because I suppose I'm not really a team player in the sense I'm going to, despite what I might try and do, say, okay, I came here with you today, right, and I said to myself, going up, the press office asked me that you'd submit the questions. And I said, don't bother. I said, because I'd be thinking up the answers to them.
Oh, yeah.
And I said to myself, well, sure, I'll be trying to be kind of half responsible. I won't say anything. I won't let a few curses. And I'm fond of cursing, you know what I mean? Like, I have bad language, that kind of thing. Right. And I did it, you know what I mean? Like, I wouldn't be the kind of person that'd be... I said one time, I think it was on the radio, I said, I think the only party I could remember I was one I'd lead myself. Because I think I'm the only person that could agree with myself. Like, I'm not... they say, that's my weakness or strength, whatever the case may be. Maybe weakness and strength is weakness
and strength.
It could be either. And like, it's not that I like to. I think there's a place in Irish politics for the Oliver Flanagans, Lord Emerson, the Conor Cruiser O'Briens, a person I don't agree with at all, and I don't agree with Oliver Flanagan, the Michael A. Higgins, the John Kellys, and the Charlie McCreevys, take five. People who maybe say the outlandish thing at times, well before it's time it's popular or politically profitable, but it leads people in a certain direction. Not everything that either of us has said, but at least with all those people you can say, at least you know what to stand for. I can disagree totally with Conor Cruiser O'Brien, absolutely with him, don't agree with anything he said, but you have to disagree with him, you have to be able to stand up and think why you disagree with him, and you have to analyse the reasons why. And I think that there's a place in all politics. Maybe it wouldn't be good that any of the five of the people that I mentioned be members of cabinet. Right. Maybe it wouldn't Maybe we just wouldn't.
Are you suggesting that's maybe more the reason that you have been passed over than you're being a maverick, as they say?
Well, you see, I suppose, no, there's lots of reasons. Like Charles Haughey's been leader for most of the time that I've been, for all the time, bar 2 years. And I suppose he's had his own reasons. I have his party reasons to consider. I've been so outspoken and caused so much trouble to the party. See, if lots of Fianna Fail people, I'd be the devil incarnated. I think that has changed a little bit anyway, because people say, or people say things like, I am a reasonably good judge of, I'm able to think down the road what will happen politically one to another. Maybe all the things I've said, on account of the fact they've turned out to be correct. Like I predicted the demise economically of the country and all things happened, that maybe I've got more respect now from the Fianna Fail voter, Fianna Fail supporter than I used to. I'd like to think, you said, was I popular? I'd like to think that I'm reasonably popular. I don't hold grudges, you see. Right. Like, I might hold it for 24 hours, maybe as long as to be a week, but I just forget about that and pass on.
As a betting man, would you lay a bet that Charlie won't lead his party into the next election?
Well, that's a totally subjective judgment about that you'd have to know Charlie Haughey's mind to answer that question. Like, part of being a politician, Charles Haughey's like you wouldn't know how he thinks personally about his own life. Maybe he wants to retire, maybe he doesn't want to retire, and everything else. So therefore, I'd say for as long as he wants to be there, he will be there, but he may not want to be there.
And there are many people in the party, because of the current groundswell of opposition to the coalition, who don't want him to be there.
It would be stupid to deny that there's not opposition within the Fianna Fail organisation to the whole thing of coalition. And that's where I think Haughey has been exceptionally brave as well. And I know the media won't give many credit for this, because they're saying, in the eyes of the public and the eyes of the media, he just did this for totally power reasons. In my opinion, it was the bravest decision ever made by a Fianna Fail leader.
Even so, it was claimed that Jackie Fahey, who opposed most vocally the coalition, was one of the few articulating what many Fianna Fáil politicians were truly feeling.
Jackie Fahey probably reflects a genuine concern and feeling of a lot of Fianna Fáil people. Not me, because I believe I was absolutely, totally in favour of what Charlie Haughey did and played a little part in it. I can understand kind of Jackie Fahey, what he feels about anyway. I think he's wrong, but he's entitled to his opinion.
He's wrong to what?
He in the past...
He's wrong to speak out? Or
no, absolutely not wrong to speak out. I defend the right of any man to speak out. I think that a lot of Fianna Fáil people are wrong in their attitude about this coalition with the PDs, that it is the evolving nature of Irish politics, it is the change in Irish politics, and we have to learn to work with it. I am totally for it, and would have been in any event. I see it as a natural Europeanisation and modernisation of Irish politics. I see nothing wrong with it at all. But I do recognise that for people, strong Fianna Fáil people, my mother was dead 12 years now, like for people like that, I'd say I know I wouldn't have to go to Fianna Fáil meeting to find out. I know it is a terrible shock to them, one thing or another. I have different views. I'm more kind of like, this is a natural thing to me, and I'm all for it.
You were instrumental in setting up the talks at the beginning, weren't you? That Charlie called you and asked you to verify the authenticity of Mary Harney's.
Yes. Well, see, Mary Harney now lives not very far from 5 miles away in a different constituency. We've been friends going back before we ever came into this house, about 1973 or 74, and that's a long time ago. So we, despite Mary Harney's, we've had many political rows and with the other, but she's a very close personal friend of mine. So therefore, I was kind of the link on account of Mary Harney made the speech on the Sunday, and everyone knows that her and I were close friends, and we're close personal friends, and we're also very down to the years when I was in trouble in Fianna Fáil. She was the one person, time in and time out, that defended me.
When he called you, did you ever get a sense of either gotcha or, my God, it use anybody to get this thing rolling?
Well, you want to remember, like, this would be very known in the public eye, is that over the past number of years now, Charlie Haughey and I would not only be good friends, but we discussed many political things that the public wouldn't be aware about. Like, he would
be aware of.
Would not be aware of. And see, in Irish life again, you see, if you and I had a row, big row, so we're never supposed to be friends again.
Right.
See, neither Haughey or McCreevy are like that anyway. Okay. Like the way it was like we took each other on at various stages anyway, and it's all over and it's in the past, and that's well forgotten about.
Well, if you were instrumental in forming the coalition, how do you think those who voted for you personally would feel about it, or party members who might feel betrayed by you?
Well, I know that there would be certain party members in County Kildare who don't like the idea of it at all.
Have you had any feeling back on that level yourself?
Very little myself, because as I explained earlier anyway, the Fianna Fáil organisation would think we would.
Well, then the people, plus the people who voted for you. But they might say this is not what we voted for.
I'd say the 9,000 people thereabouts who voted for me, is the majority would feel that I did the right thing. But in any event, even if I knew that the whole 9,000 who voted for me said that was the wrong thing, it wouldn't stop me from doing it either way. Because all my political life, and that's one of the reasons I voted up and down, I have done what hasn't been the mainstream thing. I have done what I believe to have been correct, and the people have to accept me like that. Like the next election, I might only get 9 votes, but it won't bother me either.
That's going to make you sound very much like an autocrat and a dictator and arrogant.
Yeah, I suppose I am. Yeah, I see. That's one thing that Charlie Haughey and I have in common, and I've also listened to him anyway. Like.
Autocratic, dictatorial.
I wouldn't say I'm autocratic, but I'm arrogant in the sense is that I'm arrogant in the sense is that I know my own views, I would think they're right, and I'll do them. I mean, and I don't think anyone. I'm not afraid to take on anybody in a debate, or I'm not afraid to take on anyone's views. I'm arrogant in the sense of my own opinions. I'm arrogant. I'm very opinionated one to another. But if I'm proved wrong, one thing about me I think is a good point about me. When I'm wrong, I'll admit I'm wrong. I mean, and when I apologise to a person, I will apologise unequivocally. I don't say I apologise, but I apologise.
So might that be why you and Charles Haughey get on, 2 autocrats having tea together?
Maybe I can't say about him anyway, but I know that...
You can't say that he is an autocrat. That's a public perception.
The public perception. I suppose I don't think I'm autocratic. I don't try to make people do as I want. I'm autocratic because of my own opinions. I'm arrogant. Yes, I admit I'm arrogant. Yes, I'm arrogant in my opinions because I think they're right, and I just do them. And I suppose that's a weakness. But I believe, and I'm prepared to follow it through. And if I'm proved wrong, I'm wrong. And if I'm right, it doesn't worry me the next election, like or any election. The things I've done in Fianna Fail and everything else, like sure, any other with the last small votes, all my friends, my colleagues here in the Dáil down to the years would have said, God, like you won't get any votes next election. I said, sure, if I don't. That's it.
Not long before this interview, it was reported that part of Charlie McCreevy's argument for the coalition was that U-turns had been a part of Fianna Fáil's history from the outset.
That is not a correct quote of what I said. Okay. That is what someone must have said, what I said at the Fianna Fáil party meeting, which wasn't reported. My line
was reported.
Was not reported. See, the Fianna Fáil party meetings are, but that's what some journalists wrote in the paper. Someone else would have thought of. But I did mention those things that you referred to about the changes that we made in the past. But the point I was making is that the leaders at those times had very tough decisions to make. And they did what they thought was in the best interest of the country. De Valera entered the Dáil, right, having a major problem about the oath of allegiance and one thing and another. But it was a tough thing to do. There was a tough decision to make, I was saying. In 1932, when we were in government, Sinn Féin had supported this canvassing on the electorally of that election, and yet then the pressure came on from our organisation, to let those people out of jail. In the 40s, they made a point, anyway, that we allowed people to die in jail, and we executed people in the 40s, people who had fought side by side with people, because it was in the best interest of the country. That was the point I was making, and we're trying to make a decision about coalition, which was a tough decision. But you had to compare it with tough decisions that had to be made in the past.
But true Republicans would have seen that as selling out too.
Yes, and true Republicans had members of the Fianna Fáil organisation terrible trouble with extradition, like in the recent past. Right. Not going back, say, 40 years or so, but in the past couple of years. There's always been that kind of trouble, not trouble in Fianna Fáil, always that kind of tearing at Fianna Fáil in the sense that anyway, we are very much, say, we're kind of nationalist Republican party, and yet we've had to do in government things that we really tore at the heart of the whole organisation of the party, and yet
so
it was tough.
Would you then oppose something like extradition because it tears at the heart?
No, like I believe deep down, I don't know what political background you come from, Joe, but I know that for Fianna Fáil people is anyway that it was a tearing of things to have anything to do with the Brits at all. Yet as a national party and as government, we had to do what was the right thing internationally, and the right thing for the Irish people was to have an extradition agreement with Great Britain. And there's that problem the whole time, and even in myself, there's always been a problem anyway about. So what I refer to as the breeding side of my brain, BREEDING, right, and the logical side of my brain. Right. And the whole thing is encapsulated about the whole Northern Ireland thing. That the old kind of birthright was, Jesus Christ, you've nothing to, the Brits, we're always against them and we have to get united there and everything else. Yet the logical side of my brain says, well, we have to have talks, we have to negotiate, we have to have the Dáil government in Northern Ireland, or whatever the case may be, we must participate, we must have extradition with these people. Yet, on the other side, there's that kind of thing. And so you don't have to scratch many Irish people to find that, latent nationalism, whatever it is, going back hundreds and hundreds of years. You must remember, we've 800 years of history to pull out of our brain in the last 60, right? But I remember when I was in school in the 60s down in Kildare and what another, history, was all the oppression that we had suffered from, the penal days, the famine, everything. And the Brits were the cause of all our ills. It's hard. That's in the psyche of most Irish people.
So in this great divide, or this dichotomy in you, which side is winning?
I suppose deep down the logical side wins on most occasions, but all the same, and I that's in most, and that's where that's where I understand Charlie Haughey so well about the Northern Ireland thing and what he said about various things in the past. That's why I understand him very well, because I know that I experience the same problems.
You think he has that tension?
Absolutely, absolutely. Some of the time, like some of his speeches down to the years, and maybe his attitude toward the Anglo-Irish Agreement time was announced and everything. I can understand that so well, because it's the same thing with the same pulling together like that.
Unfortunately, at this point, that particular Joe Jackson cassette tape ran out,
And when I had a follow-on tie-up-the-loose-ends phone chat with McCreevy, I mistakenly used a tape that contained the final 5 minutes from our face-to-face meeting. But what I remember most from that 5 minutes is the fact that the breeding side of Charlie McCreevy's brain clearly went into overdrive when I suggested, for example, that Pearse and De Valera's contribution to Fianna Fail must be continually critically reassessed, rather than simply regard them as sacred cows of Irish history. McCreevy said to that, "It is, I'll admit, difficult for me to even apply the phrase sacred cows to the people you mention. I can't." I asked if he believed the same thing applies to most people in Fianna Fail. He replied, yes. I then suggested that surely the first phase for Fianna Fail in stepping beyond the shackles of history is to re-examine sacred cows, and if needs be, to shoot them down, then move on. McCreevy countered, "You lodge a strong argument, but I still must say to you in all sincerity that this is one of the sacred cows I have the greatest difficulty dealing with." Pearse or Dev, I asked. He said, "What they both embody." And finally, Charlie McCreevy agreed that Fianna Fail, as a party of pragmatists rather than ideologues, was in that sense out of step with developments in European politics. And he said that if it didn't develop, quote, "the necessary ideological base of being a centre-right, free enterprise, laissez-faire, conservative-type party, it might vegetate in the bogs of history." But while we're talking about sacred cows, let's end with a clip from that phone call and McCreevy's colourful comment when I asked his opinion of Margaret Thatcher, who was at the time the British Prime Minister. Thanks for listening to this edition of the Joe Jackson Tapes Revisited, and good night.
I think I'm a contradiction in most things that I do and say in one thing and another. Now, I'm sure there are I know that there are. I'm a bit of a contradiction in myself.
Right.
And I have a totally contradictory kind of position about Margaret Thatcher. I like her balls. Right?
Uh-huh.
I admire anyone, even my biggest enemy politically or anyone else, that has a bit of neck and guts. I admire anyone like that, even fellas who have beaten me into the ground. I'm a great admirer in the sporting analogy, the fella
Right,
that
sure.
and she go up and shake, and I admire her that she's so much balls. But on the other hand, she's a tyrannical bloody bitch.
Right.
Right?
In relation to what?
Like
her sensitivity to the Irish problem?
Her whole lack of sensitivity to the Irish problem.
Right.
So every time she but that it's not just confined to Mrs. Thatcher, the insensitivity. The British establishment just don't understand the Irish. Full stop.
Hi, Joe Jackson here again. I thank you for listening to this edition of the Joe Jackson Interviews podcast. And don't forget, if you want to access the full tapes for personal or professional use, contact me via my website, joejacksoninterviewer.com.